Hi, I'm Danny Glover, and you're watching Joburg Today.
How does the national budget impact your life and livelihood in Johannesburg? Peter Ndoro unpacks this and more for the record with Patrick Atkinson, the DA Shadow MMC for Finance.
Help our viewers understand what's the connection between the national budget all the way down to the city budget where most of us as citizens get affected.
The main connection is the fact that the city itself has an operational budget of about 69 billion a year and a capital budget of about 7.2 billion a year. So that's about 76 billion, which is a huge amount of money. A lot of that comes from the ratepayers, from the rates and taxes we pay. But also a significant amount of the capital budget comes from national transfers. So it actually comes from money from central government, things like housing and transport and other aspects as well. So the city is reliant on money out of the national budget. So if there is a shortage of money in the national budget, it will affect the city in the sense that we'll get less in the way of transfers and there'll be less investment. And I mean, another example was during the COVID lockdown, the president himself said that there was 20 billion out there that they were going to pass on to municipalities to assist residents who were struggling with paying their bills because of COVID. And Joburg got about 800 million of that. So there's a very direct link between what is collected and what is budgeted for at the centre and what they can then send on to the municipalities. And obviously Johannesburg being the biggest in the country, it's obviously very significant for us.
All right, so then listening to him speaking and you're putting on your city hat, what got your attention?
I think what got my attention was the fact that he obviously had a very weak hand to play, and I think he probably played it as well as he could in the circumstances. I think most people were expecting tax rises, and I think the point I think that most of us would probably be most satisfied about was the fact that he'd actually kept tax rises out of it. So it effectively was just things like the fuel levy, increase in taxes on alcohol and various other things. But I think the bottom line is that the public of South Africa have been affected really badly by the COVID lockdown, economic effects of it. That the finance minister was cognizant of that and actually basically kept tax rises to a minimum. And that's what we'd like to see in the city as well, because we will be doing our budget in May. So we'd like to see a similar attitude coming through to keep rates and service increases as low as possible.
So that's the national budget. Then there's another layer of government, and that's province. Explain to us the connection now between city and province, and just comment on what you heard Premier David Makura say the other day.
Okay, well, the link between the city and province is that certainly when it comes to issues around health, health really is a provincial provincial competence. So obviously the Gauteng government themselves are feeling the constraints of money. I think the situation is that the Gauteng province keeps a very close eye on the city of Johannesburg because they've got to make sure that all the major municipalities are solvent and they're passing their budgets. So that's the relationship between the province and the city is really one of them kind of watching over our shoulders. So if you're in a situation where budgets don't get passed, or if they feel that we're out of kilter, that they'll come in and kind of crack the whip as well. So the relationship with the province has been slightly fraught over the last couple of years, particularly because it was a DA coalition government for the first 3 years, and then over the past year or so, there have been issues in passing budgets. So we are reliant, as I said, on province for the provision of health, and certainly when it comes to roads as well. So there's got to be a very strong link in between what we do as a city and what we do as a province, basically.
All right, so the Premier, did he say anything that caught your attention? He says he's going to fight corruption.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've heard this before, and what we've seen, which has been really disappointing over the last 8 or 9 months, and particularly in the city of Johannesburg, is 800 million rand spent on what we call PPE and sanitizers in the city of Johannesburg, fogging buildings and everything. And in many instances, a lot of those contracts we were basically paying 15 times what we should be. A lot of the suppliers to us were not properly registered. There were members of his government that were involved in that PPE scandal, one of whom was married to one of our MMCs in Johannesburg. So we'll be very interested to see. The ANC and the Gauteng provincial government always talk a good talk about corruption, but we'd actually really like to start to see action being taken, and particularly the whole PPE issue in Johannesburg, where 800 million is in question.
What is the state of the city? What is the true state of the city? We hear so many different versions of our health in terms of finances. If it's the DA running it, no, we're fine. It's the ANC running it, no, the DA ruined it for us. So what is the state of play?
The state of play at the moment is that because of the year that we've been through, the COVID lockdown really affected collections in the city. So there has been an effect on the city budget in that our revenues are not quite where they should be. The city's done quite well in the last couple of months to try and pull themselves out of that. The biggest problem, I think, is one of service delivery. So if people look around, they're seeing potholes not being fixed, they're seeing grass not being cut, they're seeing sewage not being sorted out, they're seeing street lights not being fixed. And particularly in the city infrastructure as well, because if we move to the southern edge of the city, there's been mass land invasions there. And what we're seeing is an aging infrastructure that actually can't cope with the influx of people. So this is something that's been going on over the last couple of years, over the last 3 years. And it's something that the city really needs to take hold of, because the investment that's required to be able to properly deliver electricity and water to our residents, particularly in the southern part of the city, the investment and the urgency to do that is just not there at the moment. So the state of the city is that there are a lot of really frustrated residents because they feel they're paying high taxes and rates when compared to other municipalities, but they're not necessarily seeing the delivery on the ground as to what they would like out of their rates and taxes.
Is the city solvent?
It is, but in fact, in the most recent budget, we had a surplus of about 500 million. They want to put through an adjustment budget now that's going to take the surplus down to 100 million. So we're running very close. We're basically running on the edge of the cliff at the moment, to be honest.
Where does the city get most of its revenue from?
From ratepayers, it's
Right.
from you and I. That's the most significant portion of the city's revenue. So it relies on rates, it relies on water charges, on electricity charges, on traffic fines, and then transfers from national and provincial government as well.
And so with COVID-19, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of businesses folded. That was then what translated into these massive drops in collections.
It was that, and also there was also a situation, obviously, where businesses were closed in March and April. So there were accounting departments that weren't open to even make the payments. But the situation that we found is that as you say, the people who've lost their jobs and people just not able to pay their bills. So there's been a massive effect on people's ability to pay. And that's why we're saying that we've got to be very careful that the city doesn't load too much on the ratepayer. We've got to be very careful about future rates increases. Rather like Tito did in the national budget, where he said people are suffering, we can't increase taxes. We need to do the same in the city of Johannesburg.
One of the things that we've seen pretty much throughout the public sector is that it's bloated.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people, actually, we don't know what they do all day. That's literally how it is. So as Tito Mboweni talks about public sector wage bill reduction, is that something that the city has to do?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been in a situation now where only about 30% of the city employees have actually been working over the past year. So during lockdown, a lot of people went home. Some people were working from home, but a vast portion of the city's staff actually have not been working. So we really can't be in a situation where we see an increase in staff. Because I know that was a request in this latest adjustment budget. There's certain departments who want to see an increase in staff, and we can't. We actually have to make do with what we've got and probably even cut going forward as well. Because that's certainly one of the largest parts of the city budget is the wage bill. So we need to see that being reduced.
Because as a resident, I'm not there to pay for employment schemes.
Yeah.
Because this is what the public sector often starts to look like is we've got elections that we need to deal with, we can't fire people, and we keep hiring. And once you've got a job in the public sector, it's enormously difficult to get fired. I mean, you almost need to be quite talented to get fired.
Yes.
But I, as the ratepayer,
Yeah.
I don't want to be paying for all of that.
Yeah.
I actually want to pay for things I can see.
Yeah. Our concern is that the municipalities are sometimes treated as employment agencies. And what we want to see is we want to see staff in the city of Johannesburg being responsive to people's requests and to people's requirements as well. And we really do believe that the city can do business with a reduced, certainly it's shown that it can do business with a reduced staff. And we seriously need to look at the levels of employment in the city of Johannesburg, particularly things like mechanization. So we're looking at things like meter reading. The city needs to put in place smart meters when it comes to water, so we can cut back on manual readings. There are a number of things that the city can do to modernize its operations and take it into the 21st century, and also require less staff to do that. Because it is deeply unfair, as you say, to be loading the responsibility onto the ratepayer to be continuing to pay this huge wage bill.
Again, when we switch on the TVs and radios, we hear the DA saying this about the ANC saying this about the DA, EFF also chirping in between, and we just want the lights on, roads fixed, and that's
For sure. Well, if you talk about bipartisanship, probably the best level of government at which you can do this is at the city level, at the municipal level. Because really, what is municipal government all about? It is about the delivery of services. It's about fixing the roads. It's about the delivery of water and lights. So there's nothing particularly ideological about that. So the ratepayers pay their money and they want the services in return. When we talk about bipartisanship, I mean, what was quite interesting was in the final DA government in May 2019, we came to passing the budget. And things were obviously very tight between the two parties because they were very evenly divided. And we saw the ANC coming in and voting for the budget to get the budget through so that the city could continue to operate. And likewise, a year later, the DA came in and assisted the ANC by voting for that budget as well, because what we believed in, particularly in the middle of a lockdown, was that the ratepayers didn't want to see some political battle going on, and they didn't want to see a situation like we had in Tshwane, where the city was pushed into administration because they couldn't get a budget through. So there is an element of bipartisan dealing, and I mean, we're always very cognizant of the fact that you are there to serve the residents, and as much as one wants to make points about how the city should be run or how ratepayers and residents should be treated, at the end of the day, we're there to serve them. And there has to be an element of responsibility and coming together at critical moments. And I think we certainly have shown that over the last 2 years where, as I said, ANC voting for a DA budget and then DA voting for an ANC budget, because we just wanted to keep things moving. I would say there is a fair amount of working together, of discussing issues and resolving things behind the scenes. So what we see in council really is theatre. You know, that's the place where the speeches happen and where the points are made. But behind the scenes, we are able as an opposition to get things done. And the one advantage about being in a very close coalition situation, and I've been in a government in the city of Johannesburg where the DA was only a third and the ANC was 2/3. In a situation like that, you can be completely disregarded and people go ahead. The one advantage of coalition governments is there is a requirement on people to work together. So as much as people might be shouting at each other, for the city to operate, there has to be an element of working together. And I think what is good is that this could be, it could be the starting point for the country, because ultimately we're probably going to end up with a coalition government countrywide as well. What you've seen in Johannesburg since the ANC have come back to power is kind of more of the same. So the city's run into trouble again economically. Corruption's come back. I mean, the one thing about Mashaba, even though he's no longer a member of the DA, was he was a very strong fighter against corruption. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that issues that if you're an employee of the city of Johannesburg, your job is there. Your job there is to deliver to the residents and not to line your pockets, basically. And I think that's the difference between a DA government and an ANC government, is that a DA government is very aware of our professional responsibilities to residents and our ability to be able to grow an economy where people will be able to find jobs and have a better life, basically.
Patrick Atkinson, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks very much.